If you've ever struggled growing beans, today I'm giving you 5 tips so you can grow healthy and productive bush and pole beans. And at the end, I'll share the one thing I always do to feed my soil for next season. I'm Angela from Growing in the Garden. My garden's in Mesa, Arizona. I want to help you succeed, even if you're gardening in tough conditions. There's so many types of beans, from cool-loving fava beans to heat-loving asparagus beans. But today we're talking about bush and pole beans that love growing during warm temperatures. Pole and bush beans love warmth, but they don't like extreme heat. So if you're gardening someplace like the low desert, timing is key. Wait until about 2 weeks after your last frost date to plant, and then plant every 2 weeks for a continual harvest. Here in the low desert, we get 2 planting windows, one in the spring and one in early fall. Planting at those times allows the beans to grow and develop during warm but not hot temperatures. Soil temperature matters. Beans will sprout quickest in warm soil, ideally 80 degrees, but you can plant anytime those temperatures are between 60 and 95. Cool soil slows germination and makes plants more susceptible to pests and diseases. Birds, slugs, and especially roly-polies love bean seedlings. If you plant and then come out and your seedlings are gone, one of these is probably to blame. There are a few things you can do. For birds, use tulle. You spread it over the seedlings, hold it in place with your seed tags, and it protects the seedlings from those birds. If roly-polies or slugs have been an issue, sprinkle organic slug bait over the soil when you plant. And finally, just play the odds and plant a bunch of seeds. Even if the pests get to them, you're bound to have a few left over. Bush and pole beans are both tasty and easy to grow, but there are a few key differences. My favorite bush beans: Dragon Tongue, Blue Lake, and Contender. This is how bush beans grow. Small and close to the ground. They're self-supporting. You don't need to give them anything to climb. If the plants start to flop over, you can hill up the stems, but generally they'll support themselves. They also give you a large crop all at once. And if you harvest it, it'll give you a small second crop. But then those plants are done. They're a little less tolerant of the heat, and they're best for quick harvests all at once. My favorite pole beans: Kentucky Wonder and Rattlesnake. Pole beans are indeterminate. They will keep going as long as conditions are right. They take a little bit longer to produce, but over the course of the season, you'll probably get more of a harvest from pole beans. Pole beans need something to climb: a trellis, a bamboo pole, anything. This season, I planted Rattlesnake and Kentucky Wonder in my 3 sisters' gardens. They're happily climbing up the corn. Once daytime temperatures get above 95 degrees, they might still continue to blossom, but it won't produce fruit. If you leave those pole beans in place, when temperatures come back down, you're going to get more blossoms and more harvests. If your pole beans are getting too tall, you can snip the top off to encourage lower branches. Beans are nitrogen fixers, which means they work with the bacteria in the soil to supply their own nitrogen and even help feed the next crop. If your soil is new, you can dust seeds with an inoculant before planting to increase yields. If you've been gardening for a long time and adding compost, you probably don't need to add that. If you've ever had bean plants that are lush and beautiful but no flowers and no beans, too much compost might be to blame. They don't need a lot of nitrogen in the soil. Too much nitrogen gives you beautiful leaves, but no beans. Beans are easy to grow, but only if you get the planting and watering right. Here's how to plant them. Direct sow beans. They don't like being transplanted. Plant the seeds 1/2 to 1 inch deep and space them 2 to 3 inches apart. Make sure you come back in and thin any extra seedlings by cutting them off. They don't like their roots disturbed. Water deeply and often, especially once plants start flowering. Letting them dry out can reduce the yield and quality of your beans. Let's talk about harvesting. Harvest beans when they're firm and crisp, about the size of a pencil, and before those seeds inside start to bulge. Keep an eye on your bush beans. Pick that first flush of beans and then you'll get a second smaller harvest. For pole beans, they take longer to produce, but once they do, keep them harvested. That also encourages more production. Once you've harvested as many beans as you want, leave the extras on the plant. You can let them dry and use them as shell beans, or save them to plant next year. Here's the one thing I always do now after growing any type of beans. Remember, beans are nitrogen fixers. We want to leave those roots in the soil. So cut them off at soil level. And then chop and drop those plants and top them with compost. This is an easy way to feed your soil. Once you get the hang of it, beans are one of the simplest crops to grow. They don't take up much space, they help feed your soil, and they're easy to harvest and enjoy. Thank you so much for watching. Shoot. All right. Testing. Oh. No, I shouldn't say that, right? That's an aside. And then. Oh.